Are you ready to unlock your full potential and maximize your productivity? Look no further than Productivity Smarts, the ultimate audio podcast hosted by renowned productivity expert Gerald J. Leonard. In every episode, Gerald shares captivating stories, invaluable tips, and cutting-edge strategies that will transform the way you approach productivity. Whether you're looking to reduce stress, overcome overwhelm, or simply get more done in less time, Productivity Smarts has got you covered. But that's not all. You'll also gain inspiration from real-life success stories of individuals who have achieved greatness through productivity. Plus, you'll learn the latest tools, techniques, and habits that will help you achieve a new level of happiness and fulfillment in your personal and professional life. So why wait? Join us every week as we delve into the exciting world of productivity and help you unleash your full potential. Get ready to take your productivity to the next level with Productivity Smarts. As a productivity expert and host of the Productivity Smarts podcast, Gerald J. Leonard has been a proud supporter of Kiva since 2011. Kiva is a non-profit organization that helps entrepreneurs in third world countries access the capital they need to start or grow their businesses. By making a small loan through Kiva, you can help these entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, support their families, and contribute to their local economies. And with a repayment rate of over 96%, your loan can be re-lent to another entrepreneur once it's repaid, creating a ripple effect of positive change. So if you're looking for a meaningful way to make a difference in the world, consider making a loan through Kiva. With loans as small as $25, anyone can be a microlender and help change lives. Visit kiva.org to learn more and start lending today.
Today, I'm speaking to Danny Lehr. He's the best-selling author of Win Your Next Hour, distilling wisdom from Olympians, pro athletes, and nine-figure entrepreneurs into his transformative WIN, W-I-N framework. A former PE coach turned founder and speaker, he equips professionals and creatives to conquer inertia and unlock real momentum 1 hour at a time. Danny, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me on.
Excellent, excellent. Well, listen, I really enjoyed reading your book. And as you know, I always get started with a couple of questions. And that is, one, what is your favorite style of music?
Well, I got to tell you, that changes. This is a generic answer. I like all kinds of stuff, man. I grew up with my dad, listened to a lot of classic rock. So I was into a lot of that type of thing. For a while, I was teaching PE and coaching sports at a school with a little bit different crowd. So I actually got into hip hop quite a bit at that point.
Okay.
And so all over the place. But I'd say in general, right now, it's a lot more of like, we'll call it alternative rock.
Okay. Any favorite artists or song?
Recently, a lot of stuff, kind of like Cage the Elephant, that type of thing.
Okay. Excellent.
But also, maybe favorite right now might also be Sturgill Simpson, which is out of left field because a lot of people would say that he's a country singer. So who knows?
Gotcha. Well, listen, as going through your book, you've had a lot of different things going on in your background, a lot of experiences, but there seems to be, I think the 1 hour, like what can I do in the next hour seems to be the through line throughout your book. And just as I'm listening to you or reading the book, it seems to be the through line throughout your life. That when things change, it was, what am I going to do next, right? With not next, like big goal next, but like, what am I going to do in the next hour that's going to move me forward, right? And then once I get going, look and say, okay, now I got my goals and okay, how do I move this forward? And you're finding coaches and finding mentors, finding people, finding circles of people around you. So what is that, besides that thread I just talked about, what is it about you that's allowed you to become successful in what you're doing?
For whatever reason, I just keep finding myself in these situations where how do I survive what I'm currently going through, right? And sometimes that's in a not necessarily a literal sense, right? Like
right.
You're doing business and sometimes some things aren't going so well in business, right? Like how do I keep this business afloat? That type of thing. And then there's been a few times where it's been a very real question, I have a friend that lives in Alaska and he had me up there and we were hiking on the top of this mountain. and there's no trails anywhere, and it's, remote, and no one really knows where we're at because he doesn't want to give away his good hunting spots. And I mean, at one point our water filter broke, and we're like, okay, well, so we had to boil water to drink. And then, well, how much fuel do we have? And it's like, oh yeah. And then we had to decide, oh, do we want to eat dinner tonight, or do we want water for the hike out tomorrow? There's been a few touch and go times, but overall, it really just comes down to, I don't like to pass up opportunities.
Yeah.
I like to live my life, and I like to do interesting things. And I don't know that I get so many more opportunities than other people, or if I'm just not afraid to take them, or perhaps I get these opportunities because I'm not afraid to take them. And so you meet somebody and they start talking about something that they do
Right.
that's interesting. And instead of saying like, oh, that's interesting, you do that, I'm like, oh man, I'd love to try that sometime.
Right.
And so
Right.
then that leads you down that path. Most recent example is I have a friend who's done this. There's this bike ride around Lake Tahoe. So
Okay.
Lake Tahoe's at, over 6,000 feet elevation. It's
Right.
73 miles around the lake. It's a fundraiser for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And it's a bike ride around the lake. I'm not a cyclist. Like most of my athletic endeavors were like wrestling, which is a 6-minute match, or Olympic weightlifting, which is, a 5-second lift. This
Right.
whole 5 hours on a bike's a whole different ballgame here, right? But it's beautiful up there. And I've driven around the lake.
The Sierra Mountains are beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've driven around it a couple dozen times. It's only a couple hours away from here. And I said, man, I'd like to do that. That sounds awesome. He's like, oh, you could do it. Yeah. If you just, you're in pretty good shape leading up to it. If you just, get some saddle time, you'll be fine. And I was like, oh, all right, well, okay. And so I looked, and on Facebook Marketplace, I found this old bike, and then I sent him the picture. I'm like, hey, you think this is a good size for me? Whatever. He's like, yeah, sure. And so then I just kind of leaned on him and some other friends that do cycling, and just got that old bike and fixed it up over the course of a year, and joined a group that does that ride, a fundraising team. We're actually the biggest fundraising team for the whole event. Like, as a team, we raised over $600,000.
Oh, wow.
Our team for the event. And so, yeah, super cool. And then they took me under their wing and just taught me how to do it. Like, it was like going to cycling school,
Yeah. Yeah.
meet up on Saturday and go on these rides, and they got long rides. Anyway, and so then in the end, June 1st, sometime around 1st or 2nd. Anyway, went to Tahoe and did the ride around the lake, and I survived. It was fine. I made it the whole way. I had a great time. Now it's like, I look at that bike in my garage and I feel bad for it. I'm like, man, that thing wants to get out there, so I try to get out on it every week or two to keep.
Gotcha.
But anyway, that's just another example of, it's not that I think these opportunities fall in my lap. I think that if you just talk to people and are genuinely interested in what people are doing and what they got going on, and if you're not afraid to try new things, you just start trying stuff. And the more you say yes to different adventures and opportunities, I feel like the more they seem to appear.
Yes. It's interesting as you're talking, and I'm thinking about the book. It's almost like in that story, you kind of tell the journey of the book, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're presented with an opportunity, and because you're open to new opportunities and you're open to trying things, when something is presented, you don't see it as, well, something just to pass by, or it's not aligned with me. You see it as a new opportunity, a new adventure. And, first thing you do is you go, hey, let me go call my coach or my mentor or someone who knows more than I do in this area, which you talk about in the book. And so now they go and say, oh, go get this bike. You show them a picture of the bike. He says, hey, okay, that'll do. You go work for a year and get the bike all fixed up. So that means you got to get some support and some help and things like that to make it work. Then you also found a bike club, a group of folks who ride together. And so now you have I would call it your band, right? Your mentoring group. Your
community.
Your community. And so now you're working out with them. And since they're high contributors and they've done it a number of times, you've just cut your learning curve down to how to do this. Because now you're working with people who've done that before. They can tell you how to prepare, what to eat, how to go about it. And really, you just kind of distilled your book in that story. Obviously, there's a lot more detail in your book, but if I was to look at the things that you teach in that framework, that story is very exemplary of the things that you teach.
And, it's funny, this might sound, like I'm tooting my own horn or whatever, but not intended that way. But as I was writing the book, I had some different people say some things to me that are similar to that. is, in fact, the process of writing the book was I followed the plan, the system I lay out. Because that's the thing is, well, how would I do that? And someone has this goal. They want to lose 40 pounds. They want to hike the Appalachian Trail. Maybe they want to start a business, maybe just a side hustle, or maybe quit their job and start a full-time business.
Right.
And they don't know where to start. Right. And that's what the book really does. And Win Your Next Hour, it's like I lay out a system that anyone can follow. And it's very clear. It's crystal clear. It's you do this, like follow these steps and it'll lead you there. That's not just this theory. It's like, no, here's a blueprint you can follow.
Right.
Well, as I was writing the book, I was basically following that blueprint, but I've seen people do it at the highest level. Like I've seen Olympians like do these things and say these things. And I've seen guys that started a business from nothing that now does $200 million annually, right? Like I've seen these people do this and I've talked to them. And so you just pick up habits from these things. And so I caught myself doing it. So I'm writing the book. And during that process, every Friday, I had a meeting with the editor. And so I'd have to turn in 800 words a week. And so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'd type up 800 words a day. I'd send it off to the editor. And then Friday we'd meet and we'd go over it. And one of the editors said to me, he goes, as I'm reading through this, I just appreciate that I'm also watching you do this in real time. Like I just read this section and I was thinking about last time I talked to you, you mentioned this, this, that, and the other thing. And it was kind of funny. And then when it was time to start marketing the book and doing the pre-launch, the marketing, whatever guy that was helping me out from the publisher, he said something similar. He goes, well, you did it in my household now. Win your next hour. I'm taking the kids to school and I'm like, how are you going to win your next hour? And it's like talk about the lessons from it. And he said, and I'm meeting with you once a week now. And it's funny watching you follow these steps. And so then like to what you were just saying, so it wasn't a conscious thing. But as I went to go do this bike ride, that's exactly what I did. I talked to this guy. He told me that he does it. I said, I want to do it. And he kind of encouraged me. So then I start asking some people and looking around and right. And I use my words. I'm telling people, right. If I wouldn't have said, oh, that sounds fun, I would have never done it. But because I use my words, and I said, I'd like to do that. And he's like, oh yeah, you could do it. Gave me some encouragement. And then he checked up on me, right. A couple months later, he goes, hey, you going to do the ride? It was too late for that year. And so a couple months later, it's like, hey, now's the time. If you want to do the one next year. All right. You asked me about it. And then, the I is for invest.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be money. It can be time. Well, I bought this bike off Facebook Market. I mean, road bikes are expensive. I got this one for like $150, this like 2008 used one. And then I invested time and energy. So every month, basically, I would buy another part for it because the individual parts are, $40 to $80, whatever. So I'd buy something for $40. I'd watch YouTube videos and have ChatGPT on voice mode because my hands are all greasy,
Right.
And I know how to change a tire, but I've never changed out cables, braking cables, or the derailleurs or the shift levers. And it's like at this point, it's a whole different. It's basically just the frame. I've swapped out everything else from the tires, the wheels to the cables, derailleurs. Like the entire bike is essentially different now. And that's what I invested my time, doing that. I probably spent 8 hours a month on, swapping out different parts and fixing it up. And it's like, oh, I guess I do need to buy a chain lever if I'm going to do this, and that type of thing.
Well, it also taught you a lot about bikes, and you had the confidence to know that, hey, the bike that I have is pretty good because I was the one that built it, and I had to really learn how to. So if it broke down, you would actually know what to do to fix it. Because
that was a big part of it, right? I'm like, okay, well, if something goes wrong, I know what sometimes I'm going like, oh, my chain's falling off. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. I just need to tighten up the L screw on my front cog, and it's like you kind of know those, which is nice. So I learned about that too. So there's some utility there. And as for note progress, if you're looking at how far you have to go, that's discouraging. But if you look at how far you've come, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
And so same thing, working with this group, it's like every week we did different rides. It started off, I was going 10 miles. Next week we did 20. The next week we did 34, 40, and kind of worked our way up week after week. And so I was never looking at it like, well, how am I going to ride 73 miles? I'm just sitting there going, okay, hey, last week we rode 32. Next week is 40. All right. And just like look at, hey, I did 32 last week. I think I could do 40 this week. I got that in me,
Exactly.
And you're just like following your progress. And so in hindsight, it's only since I've been doing, talking about it in interviews, I've realized I'm like, oh man, I followed my system and got it done.
And I think you did a great job in translating, the principles in the book, because one of the first things you said is the word W. I always thought the word W is win, right? And that's kind of how you start the book off. But you started off with word.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is not just the words of the person saying, hey, you can do this, I can do this, it's like, we can all do this, let's get together and sing Kumbaya. But you had to go out and buy the bike. But then you had to learn the vocabulary of biking and of how to make the bike work. And if the chain came off, he was like, okay, look for the L, this and that, and so on and so forth. And you knew what you were talking about. You know exactly where it's at. But you basically used the vocabulary to shape your focus, to shape your message to yourself, as well as be able to communicate the message out to those that you're looking for support from and to give support to. And then you invest it.
Yeah.
Right?
And not spend too much time on this, this one story, whatever. But, another thing about the words is so important. You just got to tell people what you're up to. You have to. And there's multiple reasons why, which we can go over. But part of this is, so then I tell Mark, my friend who originally brought it up, am I doing it? I signed up. I'm in. I got this bike. And he's like, great. Like 2 weeks later, he says, hey, do you have a trainer? Like for in the garage, like to put it on, because instead of riding an exercise bike, you take your actual road bike. See, I didn't know these things. You take your actual road bike and you can put it on a trainer in your garage. You can ride your bike, but in your garage, right?
Right.
And I was like, no, I don't have no, I don't. He said, hey, you know what? I just got a smart trainer, which are pretty expensive. They like moderate the watts and stuff like that for you. He goes, I just got a smart trainer. I've got this old one that I'm not using anymore. Like, you want it? I said, yeah, sure. Sounds good. And so then he gave me a free trainer. Right. So now I got a trainer in my garage that I know. And now I'm like, oh man, I guess I need to use a trainer. I didn't even think about that. Right.
Right.
And if my wife's at work, I got little kids, I can't be gone for 2 hours on the bike. And also sometimes I'll ride early in the mornings. So I try to do like 3 rides on this trainer a week. And then I do the long rides on the weekend.
Yeah.
And so I'm using this. Then I run into a friend of mine who I know he's done some triathlons. And I tell him, I say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this Tahoe ride. And he's like, oh, because I knew he had ridden, he's done some cycling. He's like, oh, that's awesome. Like, what do you, and I said, yeah, actually, Mark, he knows the guy. I said, Mark gave me a trainer. He goes, oh, is that just like a dumb trainer? I said, yeah. He goes, oh man, you're never going to make it. That's miserable. You know what? When's the ride? I say, it's in June. He goes, you know what? I've got a trainer. I've got one of these smart trainers. He goes, I'm not using it. That's only 3 months away. I'm not going to use this over the next 3 months. He's like, come over, bring your bike over later. I'll show you how to hook it up. I'll show you how to use it. And so then these things are like $500, $1,000. And he's like, here, take it for 3 months. And so I took that, set that up in my garage, and it made a huge difference starting off because I didn't know what I was doing. To be on this thing to moderate for me the difficulty and the take me through the different courses. And he's like, hey, download this app. And it through Bluetooth, it syncs to the trainer, and basically it turns your road bike into like a Peloton or something, right?
Okay, so it starts adding attention. So you
so going uphill, and it adds more tension, it backs off, so it does the intervals, does it all for you. On the other trainers, if you have a speed sensor on your back wheel, you can hook on there, but you got to shift yourself, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, you should be pushing this watt, so then you got to shift to hit that, whatever. On the smart trainers, they do all that for you. Like, you take off your back tire and you just put your chain. They have their own little gear set that you hook your chain up to, and it moderates all that for you. Anyway, this guy let me borrow a smart trainer for 3 or 4 months leading up to the ride, and again, it happened because I used my words, because I told him what I was up to. I think, and I've done this myself previously, but sometimes we're scared to tell people what we're doing. If we have this goal, they're going to laugh at me, or they're going to think it's not possible. Or if I say it out loud, that makes it real. Now I have to do it because they might hold me accountable. They might ask me about it later. Right. But I've found the more I just tell people what I'm going to do, the more like people want to help you, right? Yes. And they can't help you if they don't know what you're up to. So you got to tell them what you're up to, let them help you. And the other thing is, a friend of mine, Wes Kitts, he's a 2-time Olympian. First time was in Tokyo, and then again, just recently in Paris. He's a weightlifter. And I was thinking about telling people goals, and I thought, man, this could be scary. So I said, Wes, telling people your goal is to win a medal at the Olympics has got to be, that's going to be a tall order. I said, weren't you scared when you started telling people? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So I was terrified, right? Then he said, pretty soon I realized, though, if I can't even get myself to say it out loud, how am I really going to believe it? Right. And I thought about it, I thought, man, that's true. And the other thing is, then he found, as he started telling people, that the more he said it, the more he told people, the more he believed it. And that's a big part of success, because if you don't believe that what you're trying to accomplish is possible, you're never going to put in the amount of work and time and effort that it really takes to accomplish that goal.
Yes.
And so by saying it out loud, you believe yourself, and then it's this flywheel. And then you start working harder, because it's even subconsciously, you're not really going to put out the way you should if you think it's not really possible. Because what if you do try as hard as you can and you fail? What does that say about me? Right? Like, you don't got what it takes. And so we have this self-preservation. We don't like that. And so we start telling people, and you start believing it, and then you start actually working as hard as you need to get the job done.
Right. Right. And you also start attracting. It's interesting because,
Totally.
as you're going through the process, it's like, and you're telling your buddies who are also athletes, they're like, oh, have you tried this or this trainer?
Yep.
Well, I got a manual one. And then you find out someone who says, hey, I have an automatic one that is so much better. And it really takes you to another level in how you're putting all things together. But because you're sharing your vision, you're talking about it, you're beginning to attract other people to it, and you're beginning to bring other areas and focus areas to your goal. Let me ask you this. When it comes to your book, and even as we're talking, we've shared a lot of stories, and storytelling is really important, whether it's athletic training or outdoor adventure. How does storytelling, from your perspective, as you've written this book, really help you drive productivity in your life?
Yeah, I think storytelling is great, because what it does is it's credibility and it's vulnerability. For people to be on board with what you want to do in your mission, they got to believe it. And if they think you're just full of baloney, they're probably not going to work very hard, right? At whatever the goal is, whatever that North Star is they're going towards. Also, people need to know that you're just a real person too. And it's funny, in this interview, I feel like I've been talking about myself the whole time. And it's one of those things where, to a certain degree, you got to get used to that, because none of it's as a bragging nature. It's people want to know like what's going on, and they want real examples. I could just say like, well, you got to use your words and tell people what you're going to do. And then you have to invest either time, money, or, pride. And then you have to note your progress. Like, what the hell does that mean? How does that relate to my life?
Right.
And so you can use stories, right? And then maybe I tell a story by myself, and it's like, well, okay, that worked for you, but that's not everybody. It's like, well, here's another story, 2-time Olympian Wes Kitts. Here's another story from 2016 Olympian Morgan King, or 2012 Olympic gold medalist, right? And so, and his coach. Like, I spent 2 weeks in a house with Olympic gold medalist and his coach, right? These Ukrainian guys. And I'll tell you what, man, I learned more during that time, right, than I did in probably 2 years prior to that, just about the way they see things, the way they operate, the way they think, the whole deal. Those stories are what make it real. And then started, okay, well, it's not just this one person that had this luck. It's, I've seen this time and time again, and it makes it real. It makes it something you can relate to.
You begin to see the patterns, you begin to see the energy that goes into it. And I think you said something in part of the book where you talked about just how sometimes you just need to have the right community around you so that you can feel what's going on. I know you talked about some of the people that are in the book where they moved across country to be a part of a gym, and they had gyms where they were at in the Midwest or wherever they were at. But it wasn't the same as where they were moving into in California, where they were Olympians or folks who were at the top of the game, and the energy that was inside the building, right? And the coaching, and even I think there was one example, I don't remember, I think it was a young lady, I don't remember her name that's in the book, but I maybe get my stories confused, but it was the coach had put down like $100 bill that if you would bench press this or squat this much and so on, and was really pushing, but it was more of the camaraderie and the energy more than just the instructions. Because we can, the knowledge and wisdom today it's just a dime a dozen. You can get it ChatGPT, you get it on YouTube, but the energy you can't get from chat or from YouTube. You got to get it from another human being.
Yeah, and hearing from people's experiences makes a huge difference. I think in the stories, it's not always someone necessarily telling you a story, but sometimes you witness someone's story or you hear about it, right? And so, at that gym, we're talking about California Strength. I went out there just to go to a weightlifting seminar because the coach of it was Glenn Penlay, and he was widely regarded as the best weightlifting coach in the country. Some people would say the world at that time. And they had this team. Well, I go out there to his seminar. Well, two of the guys on the team just got first place at national championships. There's two guys that are top of the nation. They're going to go compete at Pan Am Games. They're going to go to world championships. They're trying to get, Olympic bids, all this stuff. Well, so you can see, like, you don't have to tell me this guy's credentials. It's funny. A lot of times people in science, right, what we do is, they go to study something. And it's funny, they go to study something and they'll study this coach's method and they'll go tell him, say, hey, good news, coach. We studied, your method. We put it through the scientific rigors.
Right.
And we found that it works. And he's like, well, yeah, I know it works. I've been doing this. I've seen the same results for 15 years in a row. Right. And I think a lot of times people get that mixed up. A lot of times the experience, right, the stories are actually what points the science. Like they would have never studied that if this guy wasn't having success doing it. Right. And so a lot of times the live experience is what informs the science and prompts a lot of these studies and everything. Sometimes it's the stories that lead the way.
Exactly. Let me ask you this. What actionable steps can someone listening today take to help them go from feeling overwhelmed to just saying, okay, how do I win within the next hour? How can I move forward? Because sometimes even as you're growing and you're a success, you kind of hit plateaus. We were talking about this earlier.
Yep.
You kind of hit plateaus and you're going like, okay, how do I keep moving forward? How do I get unstuck? How do I continually work on my mindset to go to the next hour?
A lot of it is just taking smaller chunks. When you look at the end result that you want, a lot of times that seems so far away. It seems impossible. And also a lot of times you don't even know what to do to get there. Like, I don't even know what it's going to take.
Right.
That's okay. Because it's funny. It's like the old saying, like, you only have to know how to count to 3 to teach someone else to count to 2. You don't have to know how to run a $10 million company, if you've never have, like, of course you don't, right? That's okay. You got to be okay with what you don't know. And so then the real question is, well, what can I do right now? What can I do in the next hour, in the next day, in the next 48 hours that'll move me closer to that goal? And so I knew I wanted to get better at writing.
Right.
And so I started writing a weekly email. And I said, okay, I'm going to write a weekly email to be good to practice writing. And so before I did that, I said, okay, well, I'm going to read about this, do like a deep dive. And so I bought 6 or 7 books that were by authors, usually by not just like how to write, but they were by fiction authors that were nonfiction books about writing.
Right.
So like Stephen King has a book that's called On Writing. And the first half is kind of a bibliography, I guess you'd say, autobiography. And then the second half, he's like, hey, maybe I'm not an expert, but I've had some success. So here's what I've learned in my, writing. Same thing. Ray Bradbury has a book called Zen and the Art of Writing. There's this author, Anne Lamott. She has a couple books one's called Bird by Bird, which is about like writing and like her process. And there's just, it goes down the line, E.B. White. And all these guys have these books about, all the authors have these books where they actually give some tips on writing. And I thought, well, that seems like a better way to go than, so I bought these 5 or 6, 7 books and I read them all. Right. And then, and pick up their tips. Like, what do they do? Right. Like these people they've done it. They've been there before. Right.
Yeah.
It's like joining the cycling club. Right. I'm like, hey, let's talk to some people, find some people who've done this before. And like, what are their processes and that type of thing. And then I practiced. And so it's like what I did in that moment is I went on Amazon and I bought a book, and they came in and I read it. And when I was getting towards the end, I bought another one and I found another one. Right. And so then I just went through those and then I started writing a weekly email. And we had a Caffeine and Kilos, my e-commerce company. So amazing coffee, great apparel in the fitness space. Well, our customer service, representative, she had ghostwritten a couple books and her parents were English professors. So I would write an email and I'd send it to her and she would grade my paper. It was like being in college again or high school again. And so, the first couple of weeks or the first couple of months, for being honest, was maybe some more grammar type stuff, right?
Yeah.
Oh, phrase this here. Oh, that should be an M dash, not a comma. And what the hell's an M dash? And, and so like this whole thing. And then what it turned though to is a couple months into it, it wasn't like little grammar fixes. It was more of storytelling things or themes, like thematic changes and verbiage and phrase usage, right? And like as I progressed, and it happened because I wrote a 500-word email every single week and I sent it to someone who knew what they were doing and they
Right.
graded my paper. And so I was doing that while I was reading these books about writing and how to be a more interesting, you know, again, fictional authors
Yeah.
telling you how to do it. Well, if you want to be good at storytelling,
They're
fiction
the best
authors will be a
ones.
whole lot better at storytelling
Yeah.
than someone who's just, writing a how-to manual.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so again, that's just using myself as an example because it helps to see real life examples. Like, well,
Yeah.
here is I had this, project. I want to get better at writing. And then as I'm doing them more and more, I'm thinking, oh, I do kind of like these. Maybe I will write a book at some point. And that was the whole thing. But if it just started off with, okay, I'm going to write a book. Well, where do you start on that? Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
you break it down. What can I do today? Well, I could learn how to be a better writer. So I'm going to buy this book, start reading it. Right. That's taking action. You have to start by taking action.
Yeah.
In one way or another. Maybe the action's reading a book. Maybe the action is telling somebody. That's what I really recommend in Winter Next Hour is like, who do you know? And maybe it's a friend, maybe it's an acquaintance, maybe it's whatever. Maybe it's somebody on social media you've seen. Like, who do you know that has done the thing you're doing or done something similar to the thing you want to do?
Exactly.
Right? Talk to them. Go tell them what you want to do,
Right. And invest the time and then start noticing your progress. I've already gotten the WIN acronym in my head because what was really cool is as you're telling your story, like when we started off, and I asked you about your background and you kind of told us the story. And I was like, man, you're going through the process again. When I asked you, how did you develop the writing skills? You told me your story, but you told me that you worked on your words, you read books, you developed a vocabulary, you hired a coach or you recruited a coach, you invested time and you started noticing your progress. And next thing you know, you're writing a book and you've gotten input. And so obviously, the process works not only in your life, but all of the people's lives that you talk about in the book and the things that they went through. Just because of our time, where can people learn more about you, about your book and the work that you're doing so that they can jump on board and figure out how to win in their own lives or win the next hour in their lives?
Yeah, absolutely. So winyournexthour.com will take you. You can learn all about the book there. Also, that's kind of subordinated under DannyLehr.com. Lehr is Lehr. So yeah, go to winyournexthour.com, check out the book. It's available on Audible, Barnes & Noble online, Amazon, anywhere you want to buy books. And then the other thing is on my personal Instagram, I've been posting a lot more kind of things from the book, kind of like some little abstract, couple sentences here and there from the book, little lessons in there. And so that's just at Danny_Lehr. And again, Lehr is Lehr.
Excellent.
So yeah, find me on Instagram, shoot me a DM if you have any questions. And then one more thing, I'm actually right now, I have a few more spots. I've been doing more public speaking lately. So if anyone has a conference, convention, maybe you have a business, something that you need a speaker for, you want someone to come in and you think this type of message would resonate with them, as far as achieving their goals, whatever they want to do, your company goals, whatever, then go to DannyLehr.com, reach out to me. I'd love to come speak at your event and help you and your team win.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Danny, I will get this out. I'll have my team put it all together. And as soon as the podcast is available, I'll let you know so that you can share it with your audience. But this has been great. Again, I have really enjoyed reading your book. And, like I said, even if you're starting out and you're looking for how do you win in the next hour, or you've been pretty successful and you're making things happen, you still are looking for what is the edge? What are the things I can learn? What can I put into practice? And that's what I took away from it was because you shared about people who are just starting out, but you also shared about people who are at the top of their game and how they're continually improving. And I think all of us are looking for ways to be more productivity smart and really move our lives to the next level and continually grow. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insight, and sharing your book, Winning with the Next Level.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me. It's been a
all right.
It's been a good
Thank you. If you're enjoying the content and finding it valuable, we would appreciate it if you could take a moment and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and helps us reach a wider audience. If you leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. Not only does it help us improve the podcast, but it also helps us attract more sponsors and grow our community. Thank you again for your support and for listening to
to the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to Productivity Smarts, where we help you achieve your goals and live your best life. We hope you've gained valuable insights and actionable strategies to boost your productivity and increase your happiness and fulfillment. Remember to apply what you've learned and keep striving towards your goals. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring episodes and expert advice from our host, Gerald J. Leonard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and unleashing your productivity smarts.